right. Well, again, thank you so much, everyone, for logging on early so that we could get started promptly at 9. And I see that it's 9, and so I'm going to go ahead and get us started. My name is Cheryl Lovato-Niles. I am the Water Resources Educator for WCU Extension. I'm part of the Whatcom Watersheds Information Network, and I'm very pleased to welcome you to this grant writing training being hosted by WWIN. I want to take a moment to introduce you to what is WWIN. WWIN, the Whatcom Watersheds Information Network, is a diverse group of citizens, agencies, nonprofits, and businesses, all involved in water and natural resources education in Whatcom County. We are an apolitical, non-advocacy organization. And our mission is to protect and restore our local waters and watersheds by supporting and enhancing information exchange, collaboration, education, and by hosting occasional skill building workshops such as this one. If you don't already, I invite you to subscribe to our monthly newsletter where we share information about local and regional events, natural resources related news, new funding opportunities, and I promise that we never share your email address, nor do we ever try to sell you anything. And you can subscribe to our newsletter on any page of our website, which is whatcomwin.org. So that's Whatcom, WIN.org. I also, before we get underway, I want to express a little bit of gratitude to our WWIN planning team members who are here today and are going to be working behind the scenes to help make everything run smoothly. It's Becky Peterson from Geneva Consulting, Rebecca Schlotterback from Public Utility District Number 1, Austin Rose, who will be with us shortly with Whatcom County Public Works and the Marine Resources Committee. And also, I want to give gratitude to Mike McComber with PUD number 1, who has also offered to provide technical support should we need that today. And I want to also say big thank yous to WWIN and the Puget Sound Partnership for providing the funding to facilitate this event. After the second session, which is 2 Wednesdays from today, we'll send out an evaluation survey to everyone, and I hope that you will take a few moments to fill that out for us. That really does help us. When it is time to ask questions, you can do that one of 2 ways. You can go ahead and raise your hand by using the gestures menu. I know you all know where that is at the bottom of the screen. And then you can unmute yourself and ask your question verbally, or you can use the chat to ask your question if you wish. And as many of you know, the only tricky thing with the chat is that it's easy to mix up who you're sending your message to. So do check and make sure you're sending your message to the whole group. I personally prefer to see the people that I'm presenting to, and if it were me, I would ask that folks keep their cameras on. It just gives a little bit more juice, but I will let the presenters express whether they have a preference one way or another on that. And also, I want to let you all know that Virginia has graciously offered to provide feedback on up to 25 writing samples coming out of this group. I believe we'll have more than 25 participants here today, but we can extend that practice and feedback opportunity to everyone if some of you are willing to buddy up with each other, partner, and work together on a writing sample. And I know that there are a number of you who are within the same organization, so that might be really easy. So send me a chat and let me know if that's something you think you can do. That'll be really helpful. And now it is my pleasure to get us rolling and introduce Virginia Lang. Virginia is going to lead us on the first component of our training today, writing a compelling case for your proposed project and organization. Virginia Lang is a veteran management consultant who has worked in the corporate sector and the nonprofit community as an advisor on all aspects of community affairs. She has served as an expert coach, trainer, facilitator, and consultant to an impressive array of nonprofit organizations. She teaches nonprofit and leadership topics for private clients, the Nonprofit Association of Washington, for Whatcom Community College, and for Fairhaven College at Western Washington University. Line Consulting specializes in planning, training, and development for nonprofit organizations. Jenny helps nonprofit professionals and board members develop their leadership skills in the areas of communication, fundraising, outreach, board and staff development, strategic planning, time and stress management, public speaking, and volunteer management. And I will give the floor to you, Virginia.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Cheryl. I appreciate it. And welcome, everybody. Please call me Jenny. I use she, her pronouns. And I am delighted to be here today. And grant writings, I'm one of the 6 people on the planet who really, really likes to grant write. And I have been doing this for a long time. I'm not even going to tell you how long, but I have been doing this for a long time, and it's hard to surprise me, but please try. So you are welcome to stop and ask questions. You are welcome to raise your hand. Once I share slides, I'll tell you how we're going to do this in a second, but once I share slides, I can't see everybody. So raise your hand because it brings you to the top when you raise your hand using the reactions button at the bottom. I am interested to know, just a show of hands, just what I can see here. And I can see most of you, those of you who are on camera, or you can put it in the chat. How many of you have grant writing experience? A lot of you? Okay. Okay, all right. We're fairly balanced here. The first thing we're going to talk about today, and the way we're going to do this is I'm going to show you some slides, and that's going to frame everything. Then I'm going to talk through stuff for a while, and you can ask me questions, and then we'll open the floor for questions and just talk some more. So we can talk about this any way you want to. You know that the first thing that the first thing that you frame when you're writing a grant is the project. You talk about the project, and then you've got to talk about why. Why should they support you? Why should this potential funder support you? And when Cheryl and I began talking about this, initially she said, well, we want a workshop on writing goals and objectives. And we're going to talk about writing goals and objectives, but I don't think we can talk about goals and objectives until we talk about the case statement or the problem statement. So let's start there. Let me ask you something else. Is there anything that's a burning question at the beginning here that you want to make sure we answer? Feel free. Everybody, I want you to be comfortable. This doesn't need to be a one-way thing. You're going to get really tired of my voice. So if you have a burning question about this, let me know so I can make sure I get there.
I do, if you don't mind.
Sure.
I'm Adrian. So I struggle with, there's always that page limit with grants, and trying to get the story in with all of the other required stuff, I find really challenging. So anything you can speak to help with that would be
okay. Great. I can answer that right now. Don't write within the character count. Don't write within the word count. Write, get it out, edit, and edit. If you try to write within the character count, the same thing applies if you try to write within a budget. Don't set your budget until after you have written. Write first, get it all out, get it all on the screen so that you can then cut, you can then edit. And what's going to end up happening is you're going to have language left over that you can use someplace else. So ignore the character count to start with and worry about that after you have gotten all of your thoughts on paper. I say on paper. That's how long I've been doing it. It's just after you get all of your thoughts on the screen. Okay. Does that help, Adrian? Okay, good, good. Anybody else? All right. All right, well, let's get started here. I'm going to share my screen and we're going to go through a few slides and we're going to do a really short exercise to talk about this. And then I'm going to talk about it a little bit more. And as I said, feel free to stop me and ask questions. Okay, so let me share my screen. Let me turn this into a slideshow before I share my screen. All righty then. Can you see it? Can anyone not? I guess the better question is, can anyone not see it? All right, here we go. Okay, first of all, a grant will call this different things. They'll call it the need. They'll call it the problem statement. They'll call it the case. They'll call it lots of different things. I would suggest to you that whatever they call it, I think the problem statement is a good overarching way to think about this. But I want you to think about it, if you will, in two sections: the case statement and the needs statement. By the way, you have these slides. You have a handout that you have these slides. So I wanted to make sure you had those. And if you want to, you can print it out and use it for notes, you know. Anyway, the problem statement divided into the need and the case for support. What's the difference? The case statement talks about your organization. The case statement makes the case, it differentiates your program, your organization, your project, whatever it is that you are writing about. It differentiates it from the other things that are out there. Why should this potential funder, who has a file full of things to look at, who has, 347 grants that they can look at, why should they look at yours? Why should they choose yours? What makes you different? And the question to ask here is, what would happen if we went away? What would happen if this went away? What's the gap? What's the gap in services that we are filling? Okay, so that's the crux of what the case statement is. What would happen if we went away? What makes us different? You talk about there, you elaborate when you talk about the other organizations that work in the field and what makes you different. We'll get there. What makes you different? You never trash the competition. You always talk well about the competition, but this is what sets us apart. This is why you want to support us. And then it expands. It goes into the needs statement. And the statement of need talks about how the organization, which you have just described, how the organization, how the program, how what you're doing fits into the wider landscape. How does it fit in? How does it connect to the cause? And the cause is wider. The cause is about, why do we need to be thinking about this anyway? What are the statistics? What are the experts saying? What are we comparing ourselves with? What is the third-party validation? And that's the need. So you're layering. You're going to do the same thing when we talk about goals and objectives. You're going to layer. Everything, of course, overlaps. That's the nature of it. Grant writing is a blend of technical writing and creative writing. You have to be able to do both. And if you enjoy writing, you've got a head start. And the hint that I've put at the bottom of this slide is nonprofits don't have needs. It should be in quotes, actually, because it's not true. We all know it's not true. Nonprofits do have needs. Nonprofits have needs for equitable compensation. They have needs for their infrastructure. Nonprofits have a lot of needs in order to make them the places that people want to work. In order to make it so that we are mission driven, we're doing the most important work in the world. I've been doing this for nigh on 35 years, and I wouldn't do anything else. Nonprofits are doing the most important work in the world in all different kinds of fields. They know more about all different kinds of fields than anybody else. And they have to, we have fallen behind mostly because of the laws that we work under. First of all, we're called nonprofits. Naming something that it isn't doesn't ever seem like a good idea. And we use other names. We use mission-driven organizations. We use other names. But I always use nonprofits. That's the IRS designation. I use nonprofits, and I use it without a hyphen because that's what the IRS calls us. And we don't have a choice in that. But nonprofits do have needs. However, for purposes of fundraising, that's not what our potential donor wants to hear about. Our potential donor wants to hear about our impact. Our potential donor wants to hear about how we're changing the world, because that's how they connect with us in the first place. Even if we're writing grants, we always have to remember that there are people on the other end. There's a person reading that grant, and whether they want to or not, they either are or are not going to connect emotionally with what you do. And that's what's going to bring them in. Even if it's a government grant, you've got two things when you're writing. You've got stories and you've got statistics. That's all you've got. You've got stories and statistics. And you're either going to lead with stories and hold it up with statistics, or you're going to lead with statistics and hold it up with stories. You're going to do one or the other. Pretty much, you're going to lead with the stories unless you're writing a government grant. When you're writing a government grant, the government keeps track with statistics. So they want to hear the statistics, but then they do have to have the stories that hold those up. They want to hear about your impact. And what's the difference? What's the difference when you say nonprofits? When we say nonprofits don't have needs, here's something that I use as an example often. Let's say I run a Meals on Wheels program. Okay. And I'm going to purposely use things that are outside of your field to frame things so that you don't fall into thinking about the same things you always think about. I'm always going to use examples that fall outside of your field. Say I run a Meals on Wheels program and I need a van. I can talk about the fact that I need a van because my old van is not running well. And the people who ride in it and drive it have gotten so that they're afraid to drive it. It breaks down often. And we can't get where we're going and deliver the meals that we do if we don't get a new van. Okay, that's a perfectly viable message, isn't it? I'm a potential funder. I don't care. I don't care. With that message, I don't care. Now, if I start talking about, I need a van, I run a Meals on Wheels program. If we don't replace my van, there are going to be 50 people tomorrow. 50 people who are homebound. And they're not going to see anybody else during the day. They're not going to have any contact with the outside world. And those people are not going to get lunch tomorrow. Now I care. Now I'm taking out my checkbook. Why? Because I've talked about the impact I've made. I've talked about changing people's lives. I could tell this same story about this van if I run a spay-neuter program for cats. I need this van to be running well because I'm going to pick up these cats and I'm going to take them to the spay-neuter program so that they can be adopted or released back into their colony. Perfectly legitimate message, and I don't care. But if I talk about the fact that if I don't do this, this gap is going to be there. And these cats are going to be rounded up and euthanized. They're never going to be eligible for adoption. They're never going to find their forever homes. They're going to die. They're going to keep reproducing. They're going to keep overpopulating. And that's going to keep happening. Because I don't have a van. Now I care. Now I care because I've talked about the change that I've made in the world. The only time that you go back and you talk about your organization is when it relates to the change, when you can relate it back to after you've talked about the change that you're making in the world. Now I can talk about the salaries of the people who are providing the services. Now I can talk about the fixing the van or getting the new van, but not until I've talked about the impact. Okay? Does that make sense? You with me? Does anyone have questions? Comments? Yes, Kurt?
Yeah. So
You're real faint, Kurt. I'm having trouble hearing
okay,
you.
sorry about that. Had the
That's
mic
okay.
in the back there.
Yeah.
So some of us don't necessarily work for nonprofits. We work in the government space, and
Okay.
and so I'm not going to say the work we do isn't as compelling or important
It is.
as some nonprofit work, but it may be a little different flavor of how we try to frame what you're saying. And I guess I'm just wondering, kind of maybe talk to that a little bit, like what, how would a government do what you're saying? It's just a little different.
And in that case, what you're doing, I think, is overcoming a built-in preconception. Okay. Yes, we are a government agency. We are making this change in the world. It's always, you still make an impact. You still make an impact. This is about messaging. This is about marketing. You know this. I mean, fundraising is marketing. And if anybody tells you it's not, they've never done it. Fundraising is marketing, and it's about how you convey the message. And if you're a government agency, you are still making an impact, and the impact has to rise to the top in order to engage a potential funder, whether you are a government agency or whether you are a nonprofit organization. If you're a government agency, maybe you talk about the reason that there has been legislation, the reason that this government agency exists, and you're still going to be talking about what this government agency does and about the wider need. And what change does that make, and what would happen if that wasn't there? Did I answer your question, Kurt? Okay. All right. Anyone else? Okay. Let us go to the next slide here. What you need to know in order to do this is the why. Okay. Why does your nonprofit, why does your agency exist? And I framed this in nonprofits simply because most of the people who come and take my courses, whether they take them from me personally or whether they take them for any of the agencies that I teach for, usually are nonprofits. I do have government agencies in there. I do have for-profits sometimes. And whatever we're talking about, we're still talking about messaging, and the process is still the same. Why does your organization exist? Why has your organization decided to make a difference? Where does your cause, the wider cause, meet your mission? You've still got a mission statement. You've still got a statement of why your organization exists. How does that meet the need? Again, and always fall back on creating a gap and filling that gap. This is what would happen if we weren't here to do it. This is the repercussion of not funding us. This is what you're going to enable if you fund us. You're going to enable something that wouldn't happen otherwise. And this is why it's important. This is why we're important. We're important because we provide this specific thing in this wider field, which is important because this is why the need exists. Okay, let's go someplace else. We're going to do something here just for a few minutes. We're going to do one. The so that chain. This is a really good way to get back to the why. Why your organization exists, why you do what you do. And this one is set up for a food organization. We do this activity. We distribute food to people who are hungry. That is a perfectly legitimate statement. But you can't stop there if you're going to convince somebody to give you money. They know what you do. That's a what. That's not a why yet. We do it so that they don't have to spend all their time worrying about feeding themselves and their families. You can expand on that statement. We do that so that they have time to think about something besides where their next meal is coming from. So that they can improve their lives and so that they can be productive at work or school or doing whatever they do. You can expand that statement. Hunger hurts. Hunger hurts. That's why we do it. We do it so that people can help themselves, so that they can think about something besides food, so that they can help themselves and others be part of their communities. That's a why. And it all comes back. You see, when you get to the why, you're going to know it. It's going to raise goosebumps. It might choke you up. It might even make you cry. That's how you know you've gotten to the why. I did this exercise. It was on Orcas Island, actually, and it was a chamber music group. And we did this exercise, and we present chamber music so that people will know more about classical music, so that people will listen to things they wouldn't otherwise listen to. We went so that, or you can do this by asking the question of so what, or, why we do this. Why? Because, okay, that's not it. What? Keep going. And what they finally got to was because we don't want to live in a world without music. Is that a why? You bet. Does it come from your head? No, it doesn't. It comes from your gut. That's where you want to get. So let's workshop one. Let's do one. Somebody tell me what your organization does.
Hi, Jenny. My name
Hi,
is
Sydney.
Hi. I work for the Lummi Natural Resources Department, and we restore habitat for salmon and write a lot of grants trying to get money for that.
Okay, you restore habitat for salmon. You do that so that.
We do that for a lot of reasons.
Okay.
Yeah, so I feel like this is a good one to brainstorm, but if anyone else wants to do one too.
Okay, well, let's and everybody, let's help. Let's workshop this with Sydney. Okay, we restore habitat for salmon so that.
So one, so that these populations can persist and grow to be happy.
The populations of salmon can persist. Okay, so that they don't go away, right? Okay, so that
we can support our local tribal communities in one of their most prized cultural, spiritual, economic resources.
right.
Is
So that
I see that Adrian dropped into the chat so that everyone can eat.
so that everyone can eat. Okay. So that keep going. And you can go back. You can go back and do a so that on the so that we are supporting the tribal community is basically what you said, Sydney, right? We're supporting the tribal heritage.
And then we could so that they can continue to live the quality of life that they have in the past.
Okay. So that what else?
I'm gonna write this down. Someone can chime in if they want.
Piper dropped into the chat so that the overall environment is improved.
Okay.
Jennifer Hunt dropped into the chat so that we don't lose the soul of the Pacific Northwest. Salmon connect everything here.
I think that's
There we go. I got goosebumps
statement.
that time. We're getting there.
Yeah.
I got goosebumps from that one.
Yeah, I love that.
Okay. Depending now you see that so that chain could go in many different directions, right? What direction you choose to take that so that chain, and it still might end up with the soul of the Northwest. But the chain in there, which direction you go is going to depend on who your potential funder is and what their interests are. Are they interested in heritage? Are they interested in the present community? Are they interested in restoring habitat? Are they interested in overall economic wellness? Are they interested in overall ecological wellness? And you know that by either their RFP, request for proposal, they've told you that in their RFP, or they have told you that in their guidelines. So which direction you take, you're going to mention all of them probably, but which direction you take to concentrate on is going to depend on their area of interest. And one of the best ways to do that is to say their language back to them. You've got guidelines or you've got an RFP. Say their language back to them. Repeat their language back to them so that they know that you've read it. Want to do another one? Thank you, Sydney. That was great. Was that helpful?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Okay. Anybody else? Okay. Use this tool. This is a great tool to use with boards of directors, with steering committees, with when you want to get back to the why. The why is what drives us. The why is why we got involved in the first place. And when we're working day to day in organizations, when we're working day to day, we sometimes lose sight of the why while we're trying to make all the mechanics work to make the thing keep rolling and running. This is a great exercise to get back to the why. You see, I've come back to sunshine and playgrounds and all of that over here. Okay. Here is something else to use. This is a purpose map. And what it does is it allows you to think about and place your organization or your project in the wider cause. Where does it fit into the landscape? And that helps you write that needs statement, that needs part of the, well, it helps you write both of them actually, but the need, setting it in the wider landscape. So we're using hunger again. What's the central thing? What is it we want to do? That's a goal. We're going to talk about that later today, but that's a goal. Hunger is not a barrier to success in work, school, or family. That's the goal. Now, what are the things that feed into that goal? There's people, there's food, there's employment, there's health, there's legislation, and there's research. Whatever organization I work for, it probably slots into one, maybe two of these. And we as nonprofit organizations, as government organizations, as organizations that are providing services that are changing things, we want to be all things to all people. We can't help it. It's part of what we want. We want to be able to fix everything, and we can't. In order to write a grant, you must be very clear about the beginning, the middle, and the end. Where does what you're writing about begin and end? What is that story? Using something like this to help you decide where do we fit. It also keeps you from mission creep. You'll see a grant. You know what? We could get that grant. We could get that grant. All we have to do is take this program and tweak it. All we have to do is change this, this, and this. Well, if we change this, this, and this to get this grant, and we get this grant, now we actually have to change this, this, and this, which means we have to reallocate our resources, our people, our money, our time. Is it worth it? Is that mission creep? Is that really our mission? Are we really filtering everything through our mission? Because everything we do has to filter through our mission. We shouldn't be doing it, or we should be changing our mission. So figuring out where you fall, taking the goal, the central goal, what is it you're trying to change? What is it you're trying to make happen in the world? Stating it, as we're going to talk about later on, as a goal. Stating it as a goal is in the present tense, and it's a done deal. That's your goal. And then listing all the things that go into making that goal happen. Which one are you working on? Which one are you working on? You're not working on them all. You can't be. You might like to be, but you can't be. Comments, questions? Okay. So those are two tools that you can use to think about the case and the need. That's thinking about the problem statement. I think that's the last slide I have here. Okay, let me stop sharing. Okay. So the first question, what is the problem to be addressed? That's always your first question. What are you solving? What problem are you addressing, or what service are you providing? And again, you have stories and stats. You're going to look at it with accurate data, which is quantitatively, and you're going to look at it with illustration, which is the stories, which is qualitative data. You want to have both. What is the unmet need, and what is your organization's ability to address it? Your ability to address it is the case. That's the case statement. This is our solution. And I want you to always think about, you're gonna hit the problem. Hit the problem, don't sugarcoat it, talk about the problem, but then dwell on the solution. You want to be writing in the positive. You want to be writing in what you are for, not what you're against. Check my time here. Not what you're against. Dwelling on the solution that you're offering. That's what you're selling. The case statement, if we were in a marketing class, we would be talking about the unique selling proposition. They're the same thing. What is your unique selling proposition? So, the need being addressed, one, it has to have a clear relationship to your organizational mission. Okay, one, a clear relationship to your organizational mission. Two, it should focus squarely on the community or communities that you serve. Be careful with community. We as a sector overuse the word. We overuse it to the point where it doesn't mean anything anymore. When you talk about community, talk about a specific community, a specific population, a specific geographic area, a specific, don't just talk about the community. The primary reason when a grant request gets denied, the primary reason, the primary thing that funders talk about is that it's not specific enough. Specific, clear, concise language is your best tool. Okay. So, relate to your mission, relate to your clientele. That's your clientele. That community that you serve, right? That's your clientele. Three, all right, we're on three now. Any assertions that you make about the problem have to be supported with evidence. That's third-party validation. These experts say, who says this? You know, Harvard Business Review says, I don't know, whoever it is says this. Research by the latest research by this agency says this. Okay. for your capacity. You have to be able to talk about your ability to address the problem, the organization's ability. And you might be talking about something new that you have added that's going to increase your capacity. You might be talking about, you might be giving a case study, different from a case statement, a case study about when it's been successful. You might be giving a case study about when it's not been successful and how you have fixed it. But you have to be addressing your capacity to address the problem. 5, make it easy for the reader. Don't make your reader work too hard. Always write for a first-time reader. Pretend the person reading this doesn't know anything about what you're talking about. And I'll give you a pro tip about when you're writing too, and you probably already know this. When you're writing something, you want 2 readers during the process of writing a grant. You want one reader who doesn't know anything about what you're writing about, so you can see if they can understand what you're writing about. And you want one reader who knows everything about what you're writing about, so they can see if you've left anything out. I've got one more. I see you, Bobby. I've got one more, and then I'll. And the last thing is, and that's 6, is right size this to your organization. If you're an organization, if you've told them how big you are, and you have given them something that you're going to solve or that you're going to work on that is obviously way too big for your organization, then you're going to have to talk about where you're going to get help. You're going to have to talk about right size is what we're talking about. Right size it and give them. I like to use charts. I like to use graphs. I like to use something visual that helps bolster the words. So those 6 things. Use the mission as a filter is the first thing. Talk about your clientele is the second thing. Get third-party validation is the third thing. 4th thing is talk about your capacity to do what you're going to do. The 5th thing is make it easy for your reader to understand. And the 6th thing is right size it, so it doesn't look out of proportion. Obviously, if it's small for your huge organization, it's only one program in many, and you're going to have to relate it back. You have to put everything in context. There has to be context. Okay. Bobby, what you got?
Hi, thanks. You mentioned your 4th point was capacity, like what capacity can your organization bring to help solve the problem. My question is, there's a lot of, especially most recently with the infrastructure bill that was passed, there's a lot of capacity building grants that are out there. So the whole goal of some of these grants are capacity building. How would you say that changes the narrative, and that, obviously we're not bringing capacity. So how does that change that point?
I think that what you're talking about, and in that case, you're talking about something very specific, because you're going to talk about where your capacity at the moment meets the capacity that you need in order to accomplish the project, or that you need in order to continue. Remember, everything has a beginning, a middle, and an end, even if it's ongoing, because what you're asking for has got a time frame attached to it. So I would be talking about, we have this capacity, it comes this far. We are writing this grant to take it this much further. You're an organization that already exists, so you've got some kind of capacity, but you have realized that in order to address the problem with your chosen solution, you need to increase that capacity, and you need to increase it in these ways. That's how I would talk about it. That's what changes the narrative. Did I answer your question, Bobby?
Yeah, thank you.
Sure. Elizabeth?
So I've been part of a grant approval process in the past for a government agency, and
Yeah.
the way that people submitted grants, we kind of had like a two-stage I'm sure this is how it goes, but this is the only process I've been part of. But there was like a abstract basically that was submitted to us. So it wasn't like the full grant that we were reviewing initially. It was like a little blurb, you know, they had like a page, not even to write. And we had to base everything off of that. So in that situation, what would you suggest as to like, you know, how to tailor a small, like if you have a few hundred words to catch someone's attention, is there something that you would take out or put in specifically to do that in that small amount of room?
I know, and that's, you know, that's not fair. I have been part of those two, and it's not fair to the reviewer, and it's not fair to the applicant. And do they call it it's the project summary, right? Is what you're getting. The project summary in that case, I try to look at, and I don't write it until I've written the rest of the grant, because I'm going to excerpt it from the rest of the grant. I'm not going to try to write it on its own in a vacuum, because I'm not going to think of everything. And so what you have to do is make the frame. This is what we're going to provide. And this is its impact. The impact is still the most important thing. This is how it's going to change. This is how it's going to make the changes that you're looking for. So I would go for, I mean, you've got, sometimes you've got something stupid like 500 characters. And that's nonsense. But it would be two very short paragraphs. And the first one would be, this is what this program looks like. And the second one would be, this is the impact that it makes. Or vice versa, depending on how they have worded the RFP. There's no good answer to that, Elizabeth.
Thank you. No, I know. I was thinking about that the whole time you're talking. I was like, this grant I reviewed, it was like 500 words exactly. That's all I had. And it was really hard to get a picture of what exactly was going on. So
yeah. And so, yeah, that's how I would address it. And I would hope that what happens with those is that it goes back, and the ones that pique somebody's interest go back, and you get to see the whole grant at that point, you know.
yeah, that's what it was.
So it was more like an
forward,
LOI.
yeah, when you move forward with that, then you see the whole grant.
Yeah. It was more like they were using that summary as a letter of intent, a letter.
Yeah, it was like a little bit of a screening process. Yeah, letter of intent, exactly. Yep. Thank you though. Appreciate it.
Sure. Anyone else? Okay. Sometimes you're talking about collaborations. If you are talking about collaborations, it's often useful to use the terminology of pilots, of that you're doing something as a collaboration, and in that makes it replicable. That makes it so that it can be replicated someplace else. A replicable model for collaboration means that somebody else can pick it up and work with somebody and do it again. So that's one of your selling points when you're talking about a collaboration, is that it can pay itself forward, because you can always include another agency. And I want to reiterate, always, the mission is always a filter. Always. It has to filter through your mission. What's our time like? I've got 5 minutes, right? Is that right, Cheryl?
If you wanted to go until 10:10, I had
Okay.
scheduled it so that you would have a full hour, and then
Okay.
we'll take a break.
Okay. All right. Let me make some other statements that will help you with this. When you use statistics that are clear and that document a current unmet need or problem. It documents something that has been done, but it documents the current problem that you're talking about. Take those statistics and use comparative statistics. Compare local to regional to state to national to international. We're not going to talk about evaluation today, but evaluation, of course, comes into this because you have to be able to evaluate. You have to be able to know what the measurement is of success in order to be able to say, this is where we're going. This is where we're going to get. You have to know how you're going to evaluate and what you need to know in order to have evaluated. So evaluation is not just this is what it means when we're successful. It's also, this is how we're going to get that information. We're not going to talk about that specifically today, but that feeds into this. You want to quote authorities who have spoken on this topic. And depending on who your funder is, if you're going to a general funder who funds other things besides your kind of causes, you want to be sure that you want to pick the authority who is the most recognizable in mainstream. If you're talking to, and you are, of course, if you're going for government grants, when you're going for grants that are insulated within your field, they're going to know who these authorities are. However, even in that case, be careful about using jargon, be careful about using abbreviations, acronyms. We do love our abbreviations. We do love our jargon in every field, but we can't expect that jargon to cross fields. So be careful about that, no matter who you're writing to. And again, that's making it easy for the reader. We used to say, you spell something out and then you give them the abbreviation and then you use the abbreviation until they turn the page. Then you spell it out again. And so that's until they scroll the screen. Spell it out one more time so they don't have to go back and look again. Make sure that any data that you use is well documented, obviously. And depending on the kind of grant you're writing, you're going to use a footnote, or you can document it within the body of the narrative. use compelling stories of people. Compelling stories that the story first talks about specific people, a person, a family, talks about a specific thing, and then you can generalize. Take it from small to large. What you're trying to do is make your reader identify. You want your reader to go, that's me. Because that's why they're going to give you money. If they can go, that's me. And you want to give a clear sense of urgency to your request. A clear sense of urgency, however, not the clear sense of urgency that says the sky is falling and if we don't fund this, we're all doomed. Because you can only do that once. You can't go back and do that again. Okay, and the last thing I want you to do is I would like you to look at the worksheet that I gave you. And you all have that worksheet. It's a great way to frame, to begin to frame the way that you're going to think about this. Who, where, when. Who is in need? And what's the problem? And what evidence do you have? And what's going to occur if the needs are met? And what's going to occur if the needs aren't met? These are all, there's not a question on this page that we haven't talked about, I don't think. So who is in need? Who is in need? Where are they? And when is this problem evident? That's in the first column. What is the problem? Right? What is the problem? And why does this problem exist? That's connection to cause. That's long term. Why does this problem exist? And what's the evidence of the problem? What evidence do you have to support your claim? What evidence do you have to support the need for your solution? And what will occur if those needs are met? Meaning, what will be different? What's going to be different? And also, how is this linked to your organization? Put back in context. This is a great way to start framing. So I've given you 3 tools and some parameters to think about. Cheryl?
Hi, thanks. Yeah, I wanted to circle back to your statement about connecting, use compelling stories of people, an individual person or a family. And for all of us who are working on natural resources related issues, I wonder if you could talk about that. Does that apply equally always when we're talking about natural resource issues, or would there be some variation on that theme?
Well, I think there's going to be variation, certainly, but I still think that you can relate it to how it affects people. What are the ways that did I used to be able to swim in this lake and I can't anymore? Were people able to eat the fish out of this? Did people rely on eating the fish out of this lake or out of this river, and now they can't because of the pollution? or we talked about with Sydney's example, one of the things we do this so that people can eat. And maybe it's about recreation. Maybe it's about, but there's something that affects the it's, if you're already in that space, you get it. I mean, if you're already in that space, you get it. You get it about conservation. You get it about ecology. You get it. If you're not already in that space, then you want to know, how does this affect me? Or how does it affect people I know? And that's how you're going to connect with it and get into that space. Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, sure, sure. So, anyone else? Anything else I can Cheryl, I came in on time. How I want to show you this workbook. This workbook is called Winning Grants Step by Step. This is the text that I use when I teach this when I teach grant writing as a 4-credit course at Western Washington University. It's a workbook. It's a really, really useful thing. So if you're interested, this is what we use as the text at Fairhaven College at Western. It is by Tori O'Neill, McElrath, and Lynn Cantor. I'm sorry, Kanter, and Lynn English. It's got 3 jars that are growing seeds on the front, just for you guys. You guys, can you tell where I'm from? I'm from New England. You guys is y'all, is Yankee for y'all. Okay. Kurt, did you had your hand up? You put it down though.
Oh yeah, I just, I didn't get down those.
Put your microphone in front again.
Sorry there. I didn't
Thanks.
get down those like 5 or 6 steps that you had gone over.
Sure.
Yeah, I was wondering if you had a minute here. Could you just run through them
Sure.
without even explaining?
The first one is the mission as a filter. It should focus squarely on your clientele. The third is third-party validation. The fourth is capacity, the capacity of your organization to address the problem. The fifth is make it easy for your reader. And the sixth is right size it. Make sure that it doesn't look disproportionate. Okay?
Yeah, thank you.
Sure. Sydney's asking you, do I happen to have those written down somewhere? No, but I can make that happen. They're out of the book. As a matter of fact, I can make that happen and just in a Word doc or something, and I will send it to Cheryl and she can share it with you.
Thank you, Jenny. Those are really great tips.
Okay. You're most welcome. Okay.
Thank you. Yes, we're basically at time for our break. So why don't we go ahead and do that? And we'll take a 10-minute break. And then when we come back, we're going to turn it over to Jennifer Grimm with the Puget Sound Partnership, and she's going to give us an overview of the Puget Sound Partnership's new strategic funding team and the support it can provide when applying for upcoming funding to support Puget Sound ecosystem and salmon recovery. So we'll see you all back here at 10:20. I'm going to go ahead and introduce Jennifer Grimm. Jennifer is a strategic planning and funding manager for the Puget Sound Partnership. She has over 20 years of experience designing, implementing, and evaluating environmental programs. This experience, as well as a diverse background as an educator, scientist, community developer, manager, and policymaker, strengthen her drive to build a more sustainable world. She is committed to creating engaging education, inspiring others, and fostering action to help solve local and global environmental issues. And I should have checked to make sure that she had made it back to the screen before I introduce you. Here you are. Thank you, Jennifer. I'll go ahead and turn it over to you.
I'm here. Yeah. Thank you, Cheryl. Thanks for that introduction. I am here today to give you a little bit of an overview of the strategic funding team. This is a new team being stood up at the Puget Sound Partnership. And so just wanted to let you all know some of the resources and support we're trying to provide to those in the region. So I'm going to share my screen, make sure this still works. Okay, hopefully everyone can still see that. Same thing as before, I have limited visibility of people. So if you have a question or comment, please raise your hand so that I can see you. All right. So again, Jenn Grimm with the Puget Sound Partnership. I am the strategic funding manager. I've moved into this position a few months ago, but I've been with the partnership almost 4 years. So fairly familiar with the system. I'm not sure how many of you are. The Puget Sound Partnership is the backbone agency for the National Estuary Program. We are focusing on both Puget Sound ecosystem recovery as well as salmon recovery. So as part of the bipartisan infrastructure law, there's a line item that provides all National Estuary programs additional funding for 5 years. The Puget Sound Partnership decided to take their little sliver of funding and use that to create a new temporary team at the partnership. So this is a 5-year team that is here to provide additional capacity and support for tribes and local partners accessing federal funding. So the vision of the team, just quickly go through it here. We're really trying to be that support to accelerate and scale the implementation of Puget Sound ecosystem and salmon recovery. We're trying to support the recovery community to plan and act across sectors and geographies. So really looking at multi-benefit approaches and also larger geography, whether this is watershed scale or Puget Sound region scale, but how can we support the collective work that is happening? We also want to be able to help tribes and partners respond to rapid funding availability. Some of you have probably seen these funding opportunities that are coming out. Some of them have really quick turnaround times, like 6 weeks to get together a letter of intent or a project proposal. So we want to be here to help support that in terms of how can we be prepared for when those funding opportunities come out, as well as, okay, we have to quickly move. How can we get something submitted in time? Just a little background for those that aren't aware. This is the geography we are working within. So again, Puget Sound Partnership is specific to the Puget Sound region, and this team is here to support those within this region. So, and again, specifically focusing on ecosystem and salmon recovery. So we are here to help with projects that are aligned with that type of work in this region. Just a quick overview of the team. There will be 5 of us once we are fully up and running. So there's myself. We have a strategic funding coordinator who is really going to be helping with the matchmaking, understanding funding needs and linking those with funding opportunities, having kind of a pulse on the ground of what's happening and how we might make connections between those that are doing similar work or just connections to funding opportunities that are flowing through the system. We have a restoration and transportation funding strategist. I'll get into this a little bit more. This was a position that was created when we understood that bill funding, over half of the bill funding that is available is transportation focused. And so figuring out how we can tap into that transportation funding as a restoration community. So the person we've brought on is a transportation background and is there to help provide some support in bridging the gap and finding the nexus between restoration and transportation work. The next position is a funding barrier strategist who is helping us address barriers that tribes and local partners are having to getting and managing funding. And the last one is we'll have a full-time grant writer and strategist. I'll get a little bit more into what those positions are and how they are available to help support you all. All of the positions are on board except for the grant writer. We are still working to onboard that position. So we're almost all the way fully staffed. It'll be great to have full capacity, but not quite there yet. This is just a quick, overview of what our technical initiatives are. I'll go through them in a little bit more detail in terms of what they actually mean. But 4 main initiatives over the next 5 years. The 2 big goals that we have are, one, with all of the money that's flowing through the system right now, how can we get as much of that as possible to tribes and local partners to do the great work that you're doing? And then we have a, beyond 5 years, once this team is, gone, what can we leave behind? What tools can we develop? What relationships can we build? What systems can we change to improve Puget Sound recovery as a whole? So those are the 2 big goals. And then these are the initiatives that fall within that. So we want to, first main initiative is increased funding for Puget Sound recovery. We want to build and maintain relationships with federal and state agencies. The idea is broadening the network that we work with, that we collaborate with, trying to create a lens for Puget Sound recovery in investment programs so that Puget Sound recovery is a priority. How do we enhance grant criteria so that it does have a lens for that type of work? We also want to be able to broaden where restoration community typically looks for funding. There are a lot of particularly federal opportunities right now because of bill and IRA where we might not typically look. Opportunities through federal DOT or FEMA, USDA, they all have funding opportunities that fit and align with Puget Sound ecosystem recovery, salmon recovery work, but aren't typically on our radar. We also want to help those federal agencies understand the work that we're doing so that when these types of applications come through, they are competitive and can be successfully awarded. So the idea behind this initiative is really working with the state and federal agencies so that when restoration, ecosystem recovery type of projects come forward, they are competitive for those funds. We also want to have an idea of how bill, IRA, and other funds are being distributed across Puget Sound so that we can understand where are the gaps, where are the funding needs, and also looking at the alignment between funding needs and funding opportunities. Are there funding opportunities that match what the funding needs are? Are there gaps in being able to take that information back to federal agencies or state agencies and say, this is great, this is where the money is going, but this is where we still need money, or this is where there are no funding opportunities available. So this is the first initiative that we'll be spending some time on. The second is providing technical assistance. So we will have a full-time grant writer and strategist on board. Where we hope that person will be able to fill a role is providing some grant strategy. For example, being able to sit down with this person and say, here's a project I'm looking for funding for, and that person having an understanding of the federal opportunities that are out there and what might align with that project. Like, this is a good fit for NOAA and not so much for EPA. or this is FEMA has this type of grant that fits with this project. Or being able to review a draft application and say, oh, you're submitting this to EPA. This is the type of language that they like to see in their grant proposals, and being able to provide some feedback there. And so just helping with strategy of matching a project or a grant proposal with what is typically looked for in grant and state applications. Again, that's the supporting the application development. The grant writer most likely will not be able to help with the actual writing of individual project proposals, but again, providing some of that feedback or strategy at the project by project level, where we hope the grant writer's ability to actually write grant proposals will come in is what we're hearing from federal funders is they're liking these pages of projects into one proposal, especially some of these federal grants are very large, 25 million, 75 million. And so the federal agencies, some of them have let us know that they like to see, instead of one individual project, they're liking to see 5, 6, 7, however many projects bundled together into one proposal. These don't have to all be in the same exact location. They could be in the same region, but they're knit together in a story, and all of the kind of same type of work. So this is where we're hoping our grant writer will come in and be able to help with compiling those proposals, those packages of projects into one proposal. The other thing we're looking at for the grant writer and providing technical assistance is these large scale transformative initiatives, these really big projects. Again, there's a lot of federal funding on the table right now that sometimes there are these big kind of dream projects that are out there that the scale of funding was just not available for before. So how can we take advantage of the funding that's flowing through the system right now and try and get some of these big ideas funded? This is where we're hoping to provide some technical assistance and support with as well. The last piece is for technical assistance around the transportation sector. So for one, we have heard of instances where there's a restoration project that involves a transportation element. And so trying to apply for transportation funding for that transportation element. And one, applying for a transportation grant is different than a restoration. It's different language, different criteria that sometimes we're not familiar with. So we have someone on staff who's able to help with explaining what that criteria is, writing with the right language that they're looking for, helping meet the scoring criteria that is asked for. Sometimes there are technical aspects in a transportation grant that we as restoration specialists just don't understand. So being able to provide assistance on getting those things together. Also, looking for how can we use restoration dollars for transportation type of projects. So having that person on board that's able to help us walk through putting together a competitive project proposal for transportation funding and helping us access funding that has been more difficult to access. I just wanted to make you aware of some more resources that are out there. This is the Environmental Protection Network. I can send out all these slides. These have clickable links so you can get to the websites. So this will direct you to EPN's website. They have a whole bunch of resources. EPN is a collection of alumni of EPA employees who provide free technical assistance and support and grant writing for EPA applications, for EPA grant programs. They also, here you can see, if you were to scroll down, they have lots of tutorials on specific EPA grant programs, if you're interested in those. So again, just a good resource specifically for EPA grant programs. Another thing the team is really hoping to focus on is the matching of funding opportunities to needs. So we want to match those tribal and local priorities and lines of work with funding opportunities. So this is also us being able to have an understanding of what's the work that you all are trying to do, so that as we are learning about funding opportunities that are coming in, we can be like, oh yeah, okay, yeah, I remember Cheryl told me about this project that needs this funding. That would be a good fit. And making sure that Cheryl knows, hey, did you see this funding opportunity? Is there anything we can do to help support you? We are working, with the salmon recovery portal. So for those that have information in there and the 4-year work plans, that's a place. But also if there are other projects that you want us to be aware of, that you're looking for funding for, please reach out and let us know. We're also wanting to provide guidance on what funders are typically looking for. Some of these federal programs are very large, but they're also very specific. And so we're hoping to provide webinars and regular calls on just upcoming funding opportunities, giving guidance on what they're looking for, the criteria, breaking it down, so that you can have an understanding of not just the funding opportunity, but also what specifically would match and be a successful application. Again, we're looking to also highlight where we don't typically look for funding. There's lots of funding opportunities out there right now that aren't on our radar typically. So making those connections. And then tracking interest in funding opportunities and make connections between those that are interested in applying. Really what the strategic funding team is also hoping to do is how can we reduce competition in Puget Sound for those that are applying to funding opportunities and increase coordination and collaboration. And so whether that's bringing projects together into one big bundled project proposal, or is it making 2 applicants aware that they're both applying for the same grant, and are there things that we can include in those proposals that show that both projects are supportive of one another, that they're both needed, and so that they both become competitive, and it's not we're going to choose this one or that one. So making the connections between those proposals. I'm going to do a quick walkthrough. Let's see, hopefully this works. So we recently launched a new tool. It's the Puget Sound Recovery Acceleration Funding Tool, or PS RAFT. This is a tool that we put together based on some feedback that we received from tribes and local partners, just around the capacity it takes to track all of the funding opportunities that are coming out. And so the idea is that we are created this central place for federal, state, and eventually maybe private funding opportunities that are specifically focused on Puget Sound ecosystem recovery and salmon recovery. So let's see if this works. Are you still seeing my screen? Yes, all right. So we tried to keep it fairly streamlined and simple. When you come to the website, the first thing you're going to get to is the active announcements. This is fairly new, so limited in terms of what's up there right now. Hopefully over the next coming weeks, we'll get more and more opportunities up there. But what you'll see here are just those that are active. So once this date hits, this opportunity is going to be removed from the active screen. That way you don't have to scroll through many different funding opportunities. Over here, you can see, all kinds of filters, depending on, what type of entity you are. You can see, if you click for one of these, only those that you are able to apply for would populate here. You can also, one of the pieces of feedback we received is that we all get lots and lots of emails of all the different funding opportunities that are coming through. And so, as you're like, oh yeah, there's that NOAA grant that I wanted to apply to. And instead of trying to search your email inbox for all of the grant opportunities that came through, you can just click here and look for either the specific funding type, or you can find the organization. So if you clicked here, NOAA, only the NOAA grants would then appear. So you can quickly find what you're looking for. You can also look for if there's a certain type of project you're looking for funding, you can click that, and any of the available open funding opportunities that are related to that specific activity type would populate. So again, it's a way to quickly filter for if you're looking for a specific type of funding for a specific type of project. This here is an alternative way to view both active and closed funding opportunities. So not only are we hoping to make this a clear place to get what funding opportunities are available right now, but also become a database for funding opportunities in general. Many funding opportunities are annually, and so this over time will grow with those funding opportunities. You can then download this as an Excel spreadsheet so that you can use, for example, if you're trying to plan out your capacity over the year in terms of what grant opportunities you might be applying for, and being able to see, oh, this typically comes out in the fall, or this typically comes out in the spring. But you'll be able to go in here and download it, and or see, you know, anything that has been active or what might be coming up that is currently closed. Another piece of feedback we got was that that connections piece. So again, how reducing the competition and increasing collaboration, who's interested in similar funding opportunities. So for here, this is a very basic version. We're trying to see how it goes before we invest more time and energy into making it more robust. But if you're interested, for example, in this funding opportunity, you could click here, and this allows you to send a message saying, hey, I'm interested in this funding opportunity. Is anybody else? You do have to go back to this page and see. You won't be pinged to let you know if someone else puts a message up here. So you do have to go back and see if anyone else put a message up here. The strategic funding team will also be monitoring this so that, you know, they can say, oh, these two people are interested in the same funding opportunity. Let's make sure they're connected. And then here is just some, you know, facts and questions, as well as the glossary. So if you want to understand what those activity types are, those strategy types as a filter, you can understand which one to click. And, you know, as someone who is looking at funding opportunities, you won't probably use this as much, but what we're trying to do with this and what we're in the process of doing, of why it's taking a little bit longer to update, is we're trying to get the funders to actually populate the tool so that it doesn't have to be one singular person trying to look at all the grants.gov applications. So if you happen to have a funding opportunity that you wanted to share out, these are the instructions that you would follow to get an opportunity posted on the site. The last thing I'll add is just here, if you want to receive an email alert. So for example, when a new opportunity gets added, it'll just send you an email to say, hey, go check out the website. There's a new opportunity, a new opportunity there. All right. Another place I just wanted to bring your attention to, if you haven't already seen it, there's a few organizations here, FEMA, America Rivers, and BEF, are working on creating a project pipeline for hazard mitigation projects. And so they are trying to develop a statewide project pipeline to tell a story and build a case for federal investments for climate resilient Washington. So if you have hazard mitigation projects that you would like to be considered for federal funding, and help get a better idea of what is happening at the state and unanticipated funding that may benefit from having an idea of what these projects are, you can go in here. It's like a 5 to 10 minute survey where you can input your project information and find out more about this program. Again, I can send out the slides, and this will have the link that'll direct you straight to where you can put your information in. and then work with American Rivers and BEF on trying to find federal funding and be part of this project for the climate and hazard mitigation projects and funding they're working with. Let's see. Okay, so our strategic funding coordinator is Sadie. Here's her email address. If you have specific funding needs that you're wanting support with or trying to find funding for, please shoot her a message in terms of what your project is, or if you want to meet with her and talk about what your funding needs are, just so you're on our radar again as we're trying to match funding needs and funding opportunities. She's just onboarding. I think she's in technically week 3, but starting to quickly ramp up and make those connections. So yeah, I encourage you to reach out if you have something. I believe this is the last piece I wanted to talk about today is how the team is working to address barriers. So we know that there are many, many barriers to applying for, managing, and implementing funding. And we are wanting over the next few years to address barriers to create a more efficient application process and effective use of the funding. We are analyzing lots and lots of documentation that we have that has come from tribes and local partners around what are those barriers, and trying to figure out where it makes sense for us to put our capacity in terms of addressing barriers. So there will be more to come in terms of where we land in terms of work for our funding barrier strategists. But I do encourage you and feel free now to add to the chat or let me know if there are things that you would want us to consider in terms of addressing barriers, something that we can work on that would make your lives a little bit easier in terms of accessing funding. I've talked to this a couple times, but again, just that nexus between restoration and transportation projects and that has become, that is something that we weren't completely aware of before and have since this spring been working on just how do we deal with this? Again, those restoration projects that have a transportation focus to them, restoration dollars won't cover the transportation aspect and transportation dollars won't cover the transportation because they view it as a restoration project. And so this is a huge problem in getting those projects done. So we have been working with WSDOT and Federal Highways and some other folks and just how do we deal with this? How do we get these projects completed? Who funds it? How do we adjust funding criteria for both so that we can fund these projects? How do we also work with the transportation sector in early stages of planning? How do we understand how to write a competitive proposal that could be considered for transportation funding? So that's an example of one of the barriers we've been working on over the last few months and will continue on for the next couple of years. This is just a real basic draft of things that we've been putting together based on the documentation that we've collected thus far. Really looking at the process of before you even get, consider the application, writing the proposal, all the way through the implementation. These dots here, just some of the barriers that we have seen thus far. And so again, just doing that work to understand the documents and the barriers that have already been shared with us, where do they fall within this process and how might we help address them? From some of this work, we've kind of seen these 4 big buckets talked about over and over and over again. These match requirements is a big one. Currently, a lot of the bill funding opportunities waive match requirements, but that's not the case for everything. Timeline issues, the ongoing capacity issues, which hopefully the strategic funding team can help with some of it, but the capacity needs are far beyond what one small team can provide. So how can we think creatively and support some capacity constraints? And then the scale mismatch. This could be in terms of a project that is so large that one funding source can't cover it, or that the timeline of the project is longer than the grant period. And so again, looking at some of these mismatches between the projects that are out there and the grant funding that are opportunities that are available, they don't match, and it makes funding the project even more difficult. So again, these are just some of the things that we are looking at. If you have specific things that you want to cover or discuss in terms of barriers, please reach out to Jessica. She is the one that's been currently kind of analyzing and synthesizing documentations that we have. She's been doing various one-on-one conversations with tribes and partners to understand barriers, and in particular, some of these emerging ones related to the big federal opportunities that are out there. So just finishing with, after 5 years, what are we hoping for with this team? What do we hope to leave behind? So we're hoping to increase the number and scope of programs that are investing in Puget Sound recovery. Again, the different federal agencies that don't typically have a Puget Sound recovery lens, or don't have criteria that allows successful applications. How can we increase those that are supportive of Puget Sound recovery? We want to be better at coordinating communication of funding opportunities. So that tool is one of those pieces of just getting information out there. We want to increase coordination and collaboration on grant proposals that are being submitted. Incorporation of new investment programs into processes, and then tracking how those funds are being used across Puget Sound. Again, trying to identify where there are gaps between funding needs and funding opportunities. And then, creating a grant system that's more accessible, easier to use, more efficient for tribes and local partners to apply to and secure funding. So I'm gonna close it out, and hopefully we have time for a little bit of questions or conversation. Here's my contact information. Please feel free to reach out with any questions or thoughts you might have. We also have a general email, which all 5 of us will be monitoring for specific funding needs or opportunities that you're interested in. Feel free to reach out there as well. I'm going to get out of here, and that way I can see all of you and see if anyone has any questions. I didn't see if there's anything in the chat, but yeah, any questions or thoughts?
There's nothing in the chat yet, or right now on questions, but yeah, we have a nice little bit of time. Folks want to ask. Looks like Sarah has a question.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yep.
I noticed that one of the positions in your team was restoration and transportation. And I just wondered if you could help illuminate how those are connected. And yeah,
Great question. Yeah, so that position evolved out of some feedback with some partners just around the complexity of restoration projects. It started with the Decabush project, where they couldn't get funding for raising the road, and just having 2 different sectors that don't often talk to each other, and in general the restoration community not understanding the transportation sector, and that in particular for salmon recovery, there is a lot of overlap with transportation, and so just how can we work together better, and at a very, very minimal baseline of like, because there is so much bill funding in the transportation sector, how do we access that? How do we get some of that towards moving a roadway to increase water flow? How do we access that for fish passage? Don't quote me on this, but it's something like, if we were to access 1% of the bill transportation funding, that would be more than all of the bill environmental funding. So again, it's just, how are we accessing funding and getting it toward Puget Sound recovery?
Yeah, that's great. That makes a lot of sense. And I'm glad to see that, actually.
Oh, great. Thanks. Yeah. We're also starting to have similar conversations in stormwater as well. That's also a place where there's lots of infrastructure funding for as well. So part of what we're trying to do is, again, those different sectors that we don't typically work with, how do we come together and work together, support each other, leverage each other, collaborate, and just get more work done. Yeah. Elizabeth.
Sorry, I accidentally turned my camera off. Along those same lines, I was wondering if there's anything that's been discussed with, especially with climate change and changes in weather patterns and things. Has there anything been discussed with like public health and restoration? Because, for example, I work in shellfish, and there's a lot that can be done with regards to that and keeping people safe eating food and keeping, like habitat improvements and things like that happening.
We haven't had any specific conversations with like public health or like the health department. There is the strategic initiative lead that is shellfish. We work pretty closely with them. Yeah, but there's not something where like restoration, transportation, we don't have that kind of, I would say yet. I am getting pinged very regularly from like commerce and the governor's office and public works and like all these different entities that are like, oh, okay, how do we work together? So one, if you have a connection to public health or any thoughts, that we would love to hear, like how we can support that cross-sector work.
I work for DOH, so I was just bringing that up because I work for the health department and we are interested in pursuing some funding opportunities, but I'm just trying to expand, where we can do that and see if there's any like kind of intersections with regards to conservation and things like that. So yeah.
Please send me an email. I would love to talk more.
Okay, great. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks.
Yep. Annalise?
Hi, thanks. Here, let me lower my hand. I just thought it would be worthwhile putting in a plug. I love this idea of trying to fill the gaps between different funding sources, trying to match funding together, like transportation, not talking to restoration, and vice versa. One additional gap that we just identified through our application process, in fact, Sarah Brooke, that's on the call, is the one who mentioned it to me, is that the Fish Barrier Removal Board funding through RCO only pays for the fish barrier removal, not additional restoration work. And so it would be very helpful, I suppose, if RCO was able to facilitate within their own ranks kind of a matching of funds within their own purview, or maybe helping with the prioritization if a fish barrier removal board application is funded and now we need to go after another RCO grant to match with that, that maybe there's some points that are given in the application process for matching within RCO or matching within state funding. That'd be helpful. Thanks.
Yeah, that's a great suggestion. Yeah. And I'm smirking because on Monday I'm leaving to go back east to meet with all of the federal agencies who provide fish passage funding, meet on an annual basis. And so they've invited me to come back and talk about what we're doing in Puget Sound, and hopefully give some input. And that's another site where I've been working with the Public Works Board as well on utility relocation costs around specific around fish passage and the barrier of that and the limitations in capacity, which are then holding up fish passage projects. So that's like another where like Public Works Board was moving forward on this, but they weren't actually talking to anyone within the environmental world. And then the federal agencies are interested in the results of this work, because then it's like, well, maybe we could change our criteria around what they fund and what they don't fund. So these are also things where like the strategic funding team is hoping to like highlight these things of like, hey, these are all barriers and making it difficult to work. So I really appreciate your perspective or sharing the, you can get the fish barrier work, you know, but not the additional restoration. And that's like also a timeline of like, these grants should be happening at the same time so you can fund the complete project, and
Right.
it's not piecemeal.
Yeah, exactly. And it could be that the narrative changes a little bit if at the end of the term of the bill funding, they weren't able to spend all the money. Maybe they could relax that rule and be able to fund the associated restoration.
Yeah.
I mean, I know right now they're trying to focus on fish barriers and that obligation.
Yeah.
The associated restoration is also good for salmon.
Yeah. Yeah. And one of the things the strategic funding team hasn't gotten too far down in is just how do we also support, right now we're calling it portfolios. Like how do we help put together a portfolio that then has multiple funding sources, and managing those multiple funding sources so that a project can move forward and not be halted by these broken up timelines and when funding is available, or like we can get funding just for this specific piece, but we can't finish the project. So also, yeah, welcoming input on that, but something we're hoping to focus on to just make it easier to get the money to do the work, and not have to jump so many hurdles. So
yeah, I've mentioned this before to the Fish Barrier Removal Board, but I guess it's worth mentioning again here that I think a nice model is the state's Combined Water Quality Funding Program. So they have one application, you turn in one application, and then they look at the different funding sources available under their water quality umbrella. And then they say, we are accepting your application, you're being awarded funding, and here, by the way, is the funding sources that we're assigning to your project. And so they have multiple programs they can draw money from. The applicant just applies, and the behind the scenes program staff figure out the puzzle pieces to fund that project.
Thank you. That's great.
Yeah.
Yeah, a great suggestion to look at. Okay, making notes. Yeah, thank you so much for that feedback. Yeah, does anyone else have any questions or thoughts?
We'll give it a minute of uncomfortable silence in case that is just bubbling up to you. All right. It's seeming as though we are ready to switch gears again. Thank you so much, Jen. That was wonderful. And it looks like we're ready to switch gears back to writing. And we're going to turn it back over to Ginny Lang, who's going to cover writing clear goals and objectives, and is also going to give us some guidance on writing and submitting those writing samples for review. And we did it. We have writing teams. It looks like we are in good shape. I'm just going to reiterate who stepped up. Dana and Austin offered to be a team. Lauren, Adrian, and Kurt offered to be a team. Bobby Buzzell and Sydney offered, and also the city of Bellingham, which I understand includes Sarah, Annalise, and Rush.
And Megan. And Megan.
Yeah, and Megan.
Megan. Oh, okay, great.
Although Annalise didn't actually agree to that. So I don't know if you have a separate writing sample you want to do, Annalise.
Yeah, so that would be my next question. Is anybody surprised by that announcement? And but
I'm surprised, and I'm going to let them submit it. I will not be submitting. Thank you.
Okay, well, I think we would be okay with you wanted to submit a separate one as well. I think we would still be in good shape, Annalise. And
hi, Cheryl. Oh, sorry, Priscilla and I as well.
Chris,
Whatcom County.
Okay, and okay, great. Thank you. And I have to say that I think that probably y'all are going to get really a lot of benefit out of that, because the discussion with your teammates will be an educational experience as well. Okay, turning it back over to Ginny.
Okay. Well, thank you all for teaming up like that let me tell you about this first in case we run over with questions and stuff. Let me do this first. I'm going to give you a week, and then I'm going to give me a week. So I'm going to ask you to have your things into me by the 6th, which is a week from today. Okay. If you can get it in before, oh, please do it. I'm going to have 25 to review. So remember, you're only sending me problem statements, which is case and need, and goals and objectives. That's all you're sending me. If you can put it in a Word document, I would appreciate it. I will use the change tracker that way. That's my preferred way to review grants. So if you can do that, if you can put it in a Word document, I would appreciate that. If you can't, my second choice is Google, but editing anything in Google is clunky. I much prefer the change tracker in Word, because you can look at it, you know, you can look at the original, you can look at it with all the markup, and you can look at it as it ends up. So it's much easier to deal with. You are going to send it to Ginny Lang Consult, GINNYLANG Consult @gmail. I'll put that in the chat. And in your subject line, I don't care where, but make sure you have WWIN in caps, so I know that's what it is, so I don't miss any of them. I am putting, and so now you've got that in case we run over. Let me put this. There is my email address in the chat. So do you have any questions about that? Okay, that should give you enough time to do it, and then that gives me enough time to do it. But if you can get it to me sooner, as I said, please do. I will be happy. I'll be happy to look at it earlier if you get there. All right. So now I am going to, unless you have more questions, do you have any comments, any questions, any heartache over that? Okay, cool. All right. Let us now, I'm going to share my screen again, and we've got some quick I've got a few, let's see. From current slide, there we go. Okay, if there's anyone who cannot see this, please let me know.
I don't see anything yet.
It didn't share?
Mm-mm.
Oh, great. Did it share?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. I thought I pushed it. Maybe I pushed something else. You know, technology is our friend till it's not. Okay. So let us talk about goals and objectives here. This was the original conversation that Cheryl and I had that was about goals and objectives. And first of all, I want to assure you that everybody gets confused with goals and objectives. And different grants call them different things, but the primary language is goals and objectives. And there are some very specific parameters. Once you get from goals, you get to objectives, and then you get to strategies, which are the actions that you're going to take. So let's start here. This is the sequence. We have first your mission. Your mission's the why. And you can use that chain, you probably already have your mission articulated. If it's articulated well, your mission says why and what, but not how. Okay, how is left open for other things. Then the next thing you have is the need, the case, that problem statement that we've talked about. This is in most grant proposals. Okay, the problem statement. Each one of these impacts back and forth Each one of these overlaps with the thing before it and the thing after it. Then it's what we're talking about here. It's goals. Goals are what the organization or the program, because you're either writing an operational grant, which is for your whole organization, or you're writing a specific program grant. I imagine most of you are writing specific program grants. What does it aspire to achieve? And as we saw back in the diagram that we saw before, that's stated in the present tense. It's stated as though it were a done deal. A goal is stated. We did this. We do this. I can't put my hand up like this because it gives me a automatic. My hand is up now. Okay, it'll go away. Okay, and then we move into the objectives, and the objectives are the accomplishments or the outcomes, and they clarify the changes that you expect from your goals. We want to know your short and your long-term objectives, and they will be outcome objectives. What do you want to see happen? Or they can be process objectives. This is how we're going to do it. And it depends on your potential funder and what they're asking for. I know this is very general. Don't worry, we're going to get specific with it. This is just framing here. And then we also talk about, and this overlaps a lot with evaluation, we talk about the measures of success. How do we know we've been successful? And those are often called benchmarks, and you're asked to include those here. And then the next step are the strategies, and that's the real how. That's the outputs. About 30 years ago, United Way decided to start calling things outcomes and outputs, and confused everybody for a decade or more about what outcomes and outputs were. And outcomes are the changes that you expect, and outputs is really your programming. Outputs is what you put out there to achieve what your objectives say. So your strategies are the how, and why you selected those particular activities. We're not going to go as far as strategies. We're going to stop with objectives today. Okay, so we're framing here. Like I said, we're going to get much more specific. Not to worry. Okay, definitions. A goal. A goal is what the program will achieve. They're visionary. They might not be measurable. They don't have to be measurable. Your goal might be something that puts your organization out of business. We have ended hunger in Bellingham. That's where I live, in Bellingham. That might be your goal. There is no hunger in Bellingham. But it is the vision. The objectives are how you know if your program is meeting its goal, is moving toward its goal. And objectives are always measurable. They're always measurable, and they're always time bound. You know where I'm going to go, right? Smart. Next slide, only I've added something to it. Objectives are measurable, and they're time bound. Goals can be forever. And then strategies define, it takes it, see, they go from big to small. This is an inverted pyramid, an inverted triangle. Strategies define the activities, the methods. How are you going to do it? It's the how to. This is how to do this. This is how to make the objectives happen. And that's why you don't want how in your mission statement, because it backs you into a corner. It paints you into a corner. We like to have our mission statement be specific enough so we know what we're talking about, and vague enough so that we can change directions if we need to without changing our mission statement. Add activities, add or subtract activities. Okay, we're still framing. And here's SMART, and we've made it SMART-y because we've added inclusive and equitable. With the conversations that we are having at this point, and when I'm talking about grant writing on a wider scale, DEAI, diversity, equity, inclusion, accessibility, inclusion, it's included in everything. It is automatically part of every discussion. It needs to be. It's always needed to be. But now in many grant requests, in many grant applications, you will find a separate question that asks about DEAI. So SMART, which we've been talking about when using for years, is specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, or realistic on some lists, and time bound. To make it SMART-y, we add inclusive and equitable. And we shouldn't have to, but we do. We do. At this point, it's something we are talking about separately. We're adding it in. And I think our goal, remember the goal is we don't have to talk about this separately anymore. It's automatically part of each discussion that we have. Okay. So we're going to come out of these slides. And I'm going to talk about this at some length here. At this point, do you have comments or questions? So I want to make sure that I answer your questions as we move forward. I'm pretty sure I will. Okay. All right. This again is adapted from the workbook that I showed you. So, goals and objectives inform strategies, and they inform evaluation. Once the organization has articulated the problem or the need statement, those things, the problem statement, the next step is to develop the goals that defines what you intend to accomplish and establish measurable objectives to meet those goals, or indicate the progress towards those goals. Many goals that you state are not going to be achievable in one go. It's something that's way out there. You know, BHAGs, big, hairy, audacious goals. Those are BHAGs. So goals are what the organization, what the program, whatever you're writing about, aspires to achieve. The objectives clarify the changes that you expect to see as a result of your work. That flips a big light switch, doesn't it? The organizational goals are narrowly focused only in that they are focused on your particular mission. It goes from big to small, always. You with me so far? Okay. Many foundations, many grant applications will ask a grant seeker to break their objectives into smaller pieces. They'll ask them to break it into activities and outcomes. Okay. And it won't go, but and those would fall under strategies, but often you're asked to include them in the objective section. It's your programming. It's the work that the organization will undertake to achieve what you said you're going to achieve. And just to make it more fun, many applications use objectives interchangeably with accomplishments. If you see them say accomplishments, they usually mean objectives. Accomplishments, but it's still what will change. Okay? They will also ask that your objectives be broken into short and long-term objectives. And they define these terms their own way. That's why you have to be very, very careful in your reading of the RFP or the guidelines. Whatever language they use their language back to them. And then relate it back to this goals and objectives information that you have. So your organization as a whole has one goal and objective. It has one thing that it works on. It works on them through various programs. And each of those programs have goals and objectives. Again, they tie back to that needs statement. They tie back to that case statement. The statement of the problem. The goals. Let me say some more things about goals. The goals show the funder that you have a vision. The goals show the funder that you have a vision for solving the problem. And the objective then takes it and measures it. You can also think of it as you're going from visionary to more real. It's getting more concrete as you go to these various things. When you write an objective, use action words. Use active verbs. Increase, decrease, reduce, improve, gain, create, provide, equip, teach. Active verbs. And you can also think in objectives, you can think of major milestones on your way to achieving a goal. That can be an objective. I'm going to give you some examples, don't worry. Goals and objectives are hard for everybody to wrap their head around. Okay, two different kinds of objectives. Outcomes, the change, an outcome objective, or a process objective. One is about what you're going to achieve, the other is about how you're going to do it. They will ask you for both, or they'll specifically ask you for one or the other. Process, outcome and process. An example, an outcome objective. We're going to go back to hunger. 1,000 children will receive lunch 5 days a week from June through August. It's specific, right? 1,000 children. That's measurable. That's achievable. You're going back to look at capacity. It's certainly relevant because you've stated the problem. It's relevant to your problem. It's realistic. It's time bound. We said 5 days a week, June through August. It's inclusive. We haven't said what population this is in, but we might. Okay. Foundations are typically more interested in outcomes, in what the organization expects to achieve. One of the ways that they ask is things like, what problem need does the project address? What is your organization's proposed solution? And how will you implement it? That's what we're talking about here. All right, I want to share with you, you have this. Let me find it, wait a minute. Let me share my screen. You have this as a handout. Goals versus objectives. This is a table. And again, I adapted it from this workbook. And these are all the things that we've just been talking about. Goals are broad statements. And they're visionary. And they can be idealistic. And they don't have to be measurable. State them in the present tense as though they're a done deal. Objectives are the realistic steps to achieve those goals. That's the difference. You're going from vision to reality. Strong action verbs in the present tense. We write in the present tense when we write grants. Even if it's something that hasn't happened yet, we could start by saying, this program will feed 1,000 children. And then we begin talking about, and we've of course named the program, and we've named it something that we can remember. And then we talk about this program. This program does this, and this in the present tense. We've stated that the program's just starting, but then when we talk about the program, we talk about it in a strong way as though it already exists. When you're writing a grant, things will happen, not things would happen if we got the money. Things will happen. We talk about this as though we already had it. That's how we do the budget too. I mean, the budget that you submit is a budget that includes the money that you expect to get from the grant. It's not real yet. It's projected. We have to remember that a grant proposal is a projected scenario. You're writing about it as though you have the money to do it. That's what you have to describe for them. They have to know how you're going to spend their money. So what you're assuming when you write this grant is, we have this money. This is what happens. Not this would be what happens. You with me? It's about language. It's about messaging. It's about the way our brains process information. So here are some examples. All children have a playground within walking distance. Okay. That's our done deal. That's what we've done. What's the objective? To increase the access to playgrounds for children in East Town by 2 playgrounds for the next 5 years. Does that meet the SMART goals? The SMART parameters. I don't need to use the word goals again, do I? Okay. Asthma is no longer the #1 reason that children miss school. How are we going to do that? Children in grades K through 3 who are diagnosed with asthma decrease their incidence of severe attacks by 15% in the first semester. That's what we want to see happen. That's the objective. Then we would go on to the strategies, or we might include the strategies there if that's what our funder tells us we have to do. All of these things that we've been talking about rely on what the guidelines say, what the RFP say. And in many cases, they're going to be truncated down into fewer categories than we have here. In some cases, they're going to be pulled back out into these categories. You may see in any grant proposal, you may see questions that appear to repeat themselves. It seems like they're asking the same question again. Read it carefully. They are, but they're asking it from a different point of view. They have kind of gone, and they're asking it from a different point of view. Now they're asking you to talk about how you're measuring. But they've asked that question already over here, but it wasn't about how you measuring, it was about the outputs. But as you're moving through the grant, it feels like they're asking the same thing again. Often, particularly with government grants. Government grants are often written by teams of people, and they're written often at different times, and they will have the voice, the way that the information is stated is going to differ within the same grant often. And it depends on how fast it's been prepared. The most difficult grant that I ever wrote was in Houston. It was in the 80s. It wasn't on the computer. This was a hard copy grant. It was for the CDC, and it was for an AIDS HIV service program. Those were written fast. I had a grant package that was this thick, And I spent more time on the phone with the CDC trying to figure out what they were asking for than I did writing the grant. Because it had been prepared quickly and it had been prepared by different departments and then brought all together. And that happens. It still happens. They got the money, by the way. It was for a YWCA in Houston. Okay, and our third example is here. All adults can read confidently to their children. The objective here is 85% of first-time new parents in the Barrisville section of any town, we have identified our population there, identified our clientele, can read and have child-appropriate books in their homes within a year of their first child's birth. This will go on to say how we're going to make sure they have that. What are going to be the actions? What are going to be the outputs that deliver that? Okay. Questions, comments. Again, you've got that. You've got that handout. So I think that may be the most helpful thing here. You know, when we talk about goals and objectives, I always tell my classes, even in the long format, when we start to talk about goals and objectives, we're talking about a moving target. We're always talking about a moving target. So if you fall back on the basics and start there each time, then you go back and you read what they ask for again, and you edit for specifically for what they ask for. It's always, here's something else, writing a grant, and make sure you've answered the question. If you read the question, and I always read my answers out loud also, because if you read your answers out loud and you have to take a breath in the middle of a sentence, the sentence is too long. If you read your answer out loud and it doesn't sound like something that would come out of your mouth, we all get real formal when we start to put things in writing. And sometimes we get so formal that we lose the meaning. So you want to make sure that it sounds like something that would come out of your mouth. And you also want to make sure that it sounds that it's not too convoluted. We get very formal, we get very academic often when we start to write. But we have to make sure we've answered the question, whatever the question is. And if you look at the question and then you look at your answer and you realize that you've written around the question rather than answered it directly, it usually means you don't have enough information. It usually means you have to go back and compile some more information in order to answer this question directly. If you have a journalism background, you know what I'm saying. Don't bury the lead. The lead is the answer to the question. It goes at the top. Then you can elaborate. Don't elaborate and spiral in on the answer to the question. They're looking for the answer to the question. Okay. Let's talk about writing. Let's talk about, first of all, the questions to ask for process-oriented and outcome-oriented objectives, okay? Process-oriented questions that you want to ask are, what services are you offering? And what is it that your organization does? What are you offering? And what service needs are you meeting? That's about process. That's about how we do it. Outcome-oriented questions that you want to ask when you're looking at your objectives are: what results do you hope to accomplish through those services, those processes? What are you striving to achieve? And what change in the condition or the behavior are you attempting to affect in the people or the environment? What change in condition or behavior? Those are outcome oriented. Is all this getting clearer? Is this helping? Okay. Okay, let's keep going with this. Who, what, when, how. In outcome objectives, now make this list for outcome objectives. Based on the problem statement. Based on the problem statement. What are the key areas the organization is seeking to change? Based on the problem statement. It's always got to tie back. You got to put everything back in context. You write something and then you go, how can I put this in context? Who, of course, what segment of the population will be involved in that change? Who's going to do it? And then, of course, you move into evaluation a little bit. How are you going to measure it? Is it an increase or an improvement or a decrease and a reduction? And by what degree? Measurable. It might be expressed in percentages. It might be expressed in whole numbers. And when? When will this change take place? How many months or years, or by what specific date? What's the time frame we're operating in? And go back and check them with SMART. Are they specific? Are they measurable? Are they achievable? Have you demonstrated that they're achievable? That speaks back to capacity. Are they relevant? Why do this now? Are they time bound? How long is it going to take? Okay. Here's some tips. Here's a list of do's and don'ts. Do include at least one goal for every project and one or two outcomes that go with that goal. They may tell you how many you have to include. Make sure that goals and objectives tie back to that problem statement. Include all relevant groups in your target population. And then you can specify for particular segments of that population if your project is going to affect more than one segment of that population. And allow plenty of time. Allow plenty of time to achieve your objectives. And often you don't get to decide that. They tell you what the grant parameters are. They tell you what the timing is on the grant. You've got a year, go. They do that. Don't, we're into the don'ts, don't overpromise. If you overpromise, you are setting yourself up for failure. Try not to, I know they overlap, but try not to confuse outcome objectives with strategies or activities. Running a food pantry is an activity. To ensure that at least 3,000 households reduce their risk of hunger over the course of a year is an outcome objective. And don't forget, first of all, don't do the budget until you've done all that, if you can possibly avoid it. Don't write inside of a budget. Write and then budget. And if you have to cut, you've got extra stuff. You've got extra language if you have to cut. You can always cut. And you've got extra language then. And don't forget to budget for evaluation. You're going to have to evaluate what you do. They're going to want to know. Okay. You have a worksheet that I gave you, goals and objectives. Pull out that worksheet and take a look at it. I'm going to give you some examples here. It's a good way to start. It's a good way to start framing. You put in your goal. You put in your goal at the top there. And for each of your objectives, if you have more than one, and if you only have one, you just do it for one. You start by thinking about the direction of change. Is this going to increase? Is it going to decrease? Is it going to reduce? Is it going to get bigger? What's the direction of the change? What's the area of the change? Is there a geographic area? Is it for particular residents of an area? Is it for, is it for a geographic area? What's the area? How specific is the area? Puget Sound is big. Where are you working? Where are you working? How are you working? In order for somebody to understand, I would think, in order for somebody to understand, if I was writing it, a change to Puget Sound, I've got to make this much smaller for somebody to wrap their head around first, and then talk about Puget Sound as a whole. Target population. Who is the target population? Is the population the people who rely on Puget Sound for their living, for their sustenance, for their recreation, for their, how does this affect these different interest groups? What's the degree of change? The degree of change is that measurable part again. What's the degree? 40%? A 40% increase in what? Salmon habitat. If that's the case, then you're going to have to provide the numbers. 40% of what? 40% from what to what? Or we're going to make this viable for 5,000 people to participate in boating. I don't know, whatever it is, but it's either a number or a percentage. And the time frame. What's the time frame you're going to work in? Is it a year? Is it 10 years? Is it 3 months? And the very last thing I want to give you here are what are the tests? Here's a test. Here's some test questions to use. Are the goals stated as results? And do they relate to the problem statement? Are they stated as results? Are the outcome objectives, what's happening? Are the outcome objectives stated as results that relate to a program goal? Does it relate back to that goal? Are they stepping stones? Are they benchmarks to achieving that success on that goal, that visionary goal? Are they stepping stones? Can everybody understand them? And can the process, can the progress, let's say progress, can it be measured? Have you given a way to measure it? Can it be measured? Can it be assessed? And do the objectives relate back to the population that you're trying to serve? Do they describe the population that you're trying to serve within a specific time frame? What I've tried to do for you here is talk about this, and you can go back and look at your notes. I said the same thing over and over and over and over again in different ways. The goal is your vision. The objective is the steps to get there. And then if you were going to go back and you were going to do the strategies, it's what do we need to deliver in order to achieve those steps?
Virginia?
Yeah.
Ginny?
Yes.
If you are wrapping up, I wonder if you could give us a preview of what our next session is going to look like with you.
Sure, I am wrapping up. When you send me something, I am going to review it and I'm going to send it back to you. At the end, I'm going to pick several of those to use as examples in our next class. And I'm going to pull several of those and we're going to talk about here's how we changed it. Here's how I reviewed it in order to turn it into something that is closer to what we talked about today. Okay. So that's something else I should have said at the beginning. When you send me this, you're giving me permission to use it in our next class, in our next workshop. Class is just that rolls off my tongue because I also want to let you know that I am teaching grant writing in February virtually for Whatcom Community College over 7 weeks. It's 3 weeks of lecture and 4 weeks of lab. And lab means you write a grant with me looking over your shoulder. And you write it there in class. You get 2 hours once a week for 4 weeks to write this grant. And you send me stuff in between. So starts February 7th, I think. So just to let you know that that's going to be out there if you have an interest.
Great, great. I'm noticing that we're just about at time.
We are.
And
yes, we are.
And so we will see you all again in 2 weeks. In the meantime, you have an assignment to submit a writing sample. And my understanding, I'm going to recap my understanding, and Jeannie will correct me if I'm wrong. You're submitting the problem statement and the goals and objectives to her, both as Word documents. I sent everyone worksheets yesterday via email, handouts and worksheets, and within that email are the 2 worksheets that will help guide this process. Worksheet on goals and objectives and worksheet on problem statement.
And you've got that golden objective table as well.
And you've got the table as well.
Yes.
And handouts from today's presentation by Jenny to refer back to. You're going to get that to her by next Wednesday, if not earlier. You're going to send it to her Gmail address, jennylangconsult@gmail.com, and put WIN in the subject line. Did I leave anything out or misspeak?
I think that does it.
Okay, great.
I'm excited. I'm excited to read what you write. I hope you're excited to write it.
Is there you said you want to keep it kind of brief, right? We don't want to go.
You're not going to send me the whole grant.
Okay, good. Yeah. So is there like a cap you want us to stay within, like 500 words or less, something like that?
Do what you need to do.
Okay.
Do what you need to do. I mean, don't go crazy, but do what you need to do. I'm not going to give you a cap. No. What I want to see, I hope that we come back in 2 weeks and I say, I haven't got anything to share with you except how wonderful these are. You know, what I want to see is that you've been able to apply what we've been talking about to your writing. That's what I want to see.
Great.
And I hope this has been useful. And thank you so much for being here and for your kind attention. I appreciate it.
So next time we'll kick off with that writing sample review and suggestions, and then afterwards at 10:20 we'll have Jennifer Grimm will present again on upcoming federal funding opportunities and how to prepare for those. Any other questions or concerns before we sign out and release everyone for their lunch? We see lots of thank yous, lots of gratitude.
It's noon. We made it on time.
Yay! Lots of thank
Jenny.
yous.